Some people forget your face, yet somehow never stop remembering how you made them feel. You have probably met someone who barely spoke, rarely demanded attention, and never seemed to chase approval, yet they lingered in your thoughts for days. Then you may have wondered why some people remain unforgettable while others disappear almost instantly, even after spending far more time with you. The answer is rarely about beauty, status, or perfect words. It often begins much deeper, inside the hidden architecture of the human mind. Most people assume that making someone think about you requires constant texting, clever tricks, or carefully planned mystery. But the mind does not become attached through force. It becomes attached through emotional significance. The people who occupy our thoughts are usually those who awaken something unfinished within us, whether that feeling is comfort, curiosity, admiration, uncertainty, or even unanswered longing. Perhaps you have experienced this yourself. You replay conversations after they end, wondering if you said too much or too little. You remember tiny moments that everyone else has already forgotten. A smile, a pause, a glance across a crowded room somehow becomes louder in your memory than an entire afternoon of ordinary conversation. The strange part is that these moments often feel accidental, yet they shape emotional memory more than grand gestures ever could. This is the quiet contradiction of human connection. The harder we try to control another person's thoughts, the more invisible we often become. Yet when we express genuine presence, emotional authenticity, and quiet confidence, we sometimes leave impressions that continue growing long after we have walked away. What stays in the mind is rarely perfection, it is emotional meaning. In this video, we will uncover the hidden psychology behind why certain people become unforgettable, how the brain decides who deserves mental space, and why the deepest influence often comes from the smallest moments that most people never even notice. None of us enters the world already knowing how to leave lasting impressions. Long before we understand attraction, friendship, or influence, our brains begin quietly learning one question above all others: who makes me feel safe, understood, or emotionally alive? Every meaningful relationship we build later is shaped by those early lessons, often without our awareness. As children, our nervous systems absorb far more than words. We notice facial expressions before language fully develops. We learn whether comfort arrives consistently or unpredictably. We begin recognizing subtle emotional patterns because survival depends on understanding the people closest to us. A caregiver's smile, silence, or sudden change in mood becomes valuable information that teaches the brain how relationships work. Neuroscientists often describe the brain as a prediction machine. Rather than simply reacting to the present, it constantly anticipates what will happen next. Every interaction becomes another piece of evidence helping the brain decide whom to trust, avoid, remember, or seek again. Emotional experiences strengthen these predictions far more powerfully than ordinary facts, because feelings activate memory systems designed to protect future survival. This is why emotionally significant people become difficult to forget. When someone consistently makes you feel calm, deeply understood, unexpectedly inspired, or intriguingly uncertain, your brain does not file them away like ordinary information. Instead, it repeatedly revisits those encounters, searching for meaning and predicting what future interactions might bring. The person becomes less of a memory and more of an unfinished mental pattern. Childhood experiences quietly influence this process. Someone who grew up receiving unpredictable affection may become especially sensitive to inconsistency. Another raised in a secure, emotionally warm environment may naturally remember people who offer genuine acceptance rather than emotional games. Neither response means the person is broken. It simply reflects how an adaptable brain learned to navigate connection using the experiences available at the time. Psychologists call this emotional conditioning, while neuroscience points to networks involving the amygdala, hippocampus, and prefrontal cortex working together to prioritize emotionally important memories. These systems are not trying to create romance or obsession. They are attempting to answer an ancient biological question: which people matter enough to remember, because they may shape my future. Think about someone whose encouragement arrived exactly when you doubted yourself. Years may pass before you hear their voice again, yet a single phrase they spoke can suddenly return during your hardest moments. The memory survives not because of its length, but because it became attached to a powerful emotional state. The brain protects experiences that change how we see ourselves. Understanding this changes everything. Making people think about you is not about becoming louder, more mysterious, or impossible to reach. It begins by understanding how emotional memory is formed. Once you see the hidden mechanisms beneath human connection, the behaviors that make someone unforgettable become far less magical and far more profoundly human. The first sign is emotional presence. Most conversations are filled with people waiting for their turn to speak. But unforgettable people make others feel completely heard. They notice the hesitation before a sentence, the emotion behind a smile, and the meaning hidden between words. For a few moments, the other person feels as though the rest of the world has quietly disappeared. Imagine sharing a difficult story with someone who never interrupts, never rushes to fix you, and never checks their phone. Instead, they simply remain present. Hours later, you may struggle to remember every word they said, yet you vividly remember how safe you felt. Psychology shows that emotions become powerful anchors for memory, making genuine presence far more unforgettable than impressive conversation. That emotional safety naturally leads to the second sign: authentic unpredictability. The human brain pays special attention to experiences it cannot completely predict. This does not mean playing manipulative games or creating unnecessary distance. It means refusing to become a performance designed only to satisfy expectations. Authentic people surprise others because they respond honestly instead of following rehearsed social scripts. Think about the friend who always speaks with quiet sincerity. They may laugh unexpectedly, admit when they are afraid, or express appreciation without embarrassment. Their behavior feels real rather than calculated. The brain notices this because authenticity reduces cognitive noise. Instead of analyzing hidden motives, people begin attaching emotional value to the relationship itself, creating memories that linger long after the interaction ends. As emotional value grows, another pattern quietly emerges. The people who occupy our thoughts are often those who awaken curiosity instead of providing immediate emotional closure. Not because they intentionally create confusion, but because every meaningful interaction reveals another layer waiting to be discovered. Curiosity becomes the bridge between memory and continued attention. This brings us to the third sign: leaving emotional echoes instead of constant reminders. Many people believe staying unforgettable requires endless messages, daily updates, or continuous visibility. Yet constant exposure often allows the brain to adapt, making each interaction feel increasingly ordinary. Emotionally meaningful moments, separated by space, give memory room to deepen instead of becoming background noise. Picture spending one unforgettable evening talking with someone beneath a quiet sky. Weeks later, a familiar song begins playing, and without warning, your mind returns to that conversation. Nothing forced the memory to appear. It resurfaced because the experience carried emotional weight. Neuroscience suggests that emotionally rich memories are strengthened each time they are naturally recalled, making them increasingly difficult to forget. As these emotional echoes accumulate, they shape something even deeper than memory. They begin influencing expectation. Without realizing it, the mind starts anticipating future encounters, imagining unfinished conversations, and replaying meaningful moments. What began as simple remembrance slowly transforms into psychological anticipation, revealing another hidden pattern behind why certain people remain permanently alive inside our thoughts. The fourth sign is emotional consistency. While unpredictability sparks curiosity, consistency builds trust. The brain can tolerate mystery for only so long before it begins searching for stability. When someone repeatedly shows kindness, honesty, and emotional reliability, the nervous system slowly lowers its guard. That feeling of safety becomes deeply rewarding, encouraging the mind to return to thoughts of that person even in their absence. Imagine two friends. One appears only when life is exciting, disappearing whenever things become difficult. The other quietly checks on you after a hard day, remembers small details you mentioned weeks ago, and keeps their promises without making a show of it. Years later, it is usually the second friend who occupies your memories. Reliability may not create fireworks, but it creates emotional roots. Psychologists have long observed that trust grows through repeated positive experiences rather than dramatic gestures. Every fulfilled promise tells the brain that this relationship is worth investing in. The prefrontal cortex gradually reduces its need for constant vigilance, while emotional memory strengthens around feelings of security instead of uncertainty. The result is a connection that feels calm, yet remarkably difficult to replace. Once trust has formed, another powerful force begins shaping the relationship. It is the feeling of being genuinely understood. Few human experiences are as emotionally significant as realizing someone sees parts of you that you rarely reveal. Being understood satisfies one of our deepest psychological needs, making the person who provides that experience almost impossible to dismiss. Think about a conversation where someone notices your hidden exhaustion before you admit it, or recognizes the fear behind your confidence. They do not expose you or judge you. They simply understand. That moment often stays alive for years because it touches something beyond ordinary communication. It reaches identity itself, and memories connected to identity are among the strongest the brain can create. This becomes the fifth sign, reflecting people back to themselves. Unforgettable individuals often help others recognize strengths, hopes, or emotions they had overlooked. They ask thoughtful questions, notice quiet growth, and encourage without pretending to have every answer. Instead of becoming the center of attention, they become a mirror through which others see themselves more clearly. Research in social psychology suggests that people are naturally drawn toward relationships that reinforce a coherent and valued sense of self. When someone consistently helps us feel capable, accepted, or deeply seen, our minds begin associating their presence with emotional growth. We do not simply remember them because they were interesting, we remember them because we became a little more ourselves in their presence. Yet even this is not the deepest layer. Presence, authenticity, consistency, and understanding all leave powerful impressions. But there is one final pattern quietly connecting them together. It explains why some people remain in our thoughts for months or even years, not because they demanded attention, but because they changed the emotional landscape of our inner world in ways we never fully recognized. At first, thinking about someone feels almost comforting. Their words replay in quiet moments. Their laughter appears without warning, and ordinary places begin carrying extraordinary memories. It seems harmless, even beautiful. But as emotional significance grows, the mind starts doing what it has always done best. It begins searching for certainty where certainty does not exist. The brain dislikes unfinished stories. Psychologists refer to this tendency as the drive for cognitive closure. When a relationship feels unresolved, emotionally important, or filled with unanswered questions, the mind keeps returning to it, hoping another round of thinking will finally provide peace. Instead, each replay often creates another question, trapping us inside a cycle that feels productive but rarely is. Soon, imagination begins filling the spaces that reality leaves behind. A delayed reply becomes a dozen possible explanations. A short conversation is analyzed from every angle. A passing expression suddenly seems loaded with hidden meaning. The mind believes it is protecting the heart by predicting every possible outcome, but prediction slowly transforms into emotional exhaustion. Neuroscience suggests that repeated rumination strengthens the same neural pathways each time the thoughts return. Like a trail through a forest becoming easier to walk with every step, the brain learns to revisit the same emotional landscape automatically. Eventually, you are no longer choosing the thoughts. The thoughts begin choosing you. This creates a quiet loneliness that is difficult to explain. You may be surrounded by people, yet mentally absent because your attention keeps drifting somewhere else. Conversations become shorter. Moments lose their fullness. Instead of experiencing life as it unfolds, you experience your own interpretations of it. The person occupying your mind may not even realize the space they now hold within you. Ironically, the harder you try to make someone think about you through control, manipulation, or constant pursuit, the more likely you are to become trapped in your own psychological game. Your attention shifts away from genuine connection and toward monitoring reactions, counting responses, and measuring emotional distance. What began as a desire to be remembered quietly becomes a fear of being forgotten. This is where many people mistake awareness for control. They believe that if they can predict every emotion, every conversation, and every possible outcome, they will never be hurt. But the human heart does not respond to perfect calculations. Relationships breathe through uncertainty, vulnerability, and mutual freedom. Trying to control every possibility often suffocates the very connection you hope to preserve. The deepest irony is that unforgettable people are rarely consumed by proving they are unforgettable. They are absorbed in living authentically, loving sincerely, and showing up honestly. Their influence comes not from chasing attention, but from creating moments that carry genuine emotional truth. And perhaps that is the hardest lesson of all. The more desperately we try to occupy someone else's mind, the less present we become within our own. There comes a quiet moment when everything begins to change. You stop asking how to stay inside another person's mind and begin asking a far more powerful question. What kind of presence do I bring into the lives of others? That single shift moves your attention away from control and toward connection, where lasting relationships are actually born. The first step is surprisingly simple. Replace performance with presence. You do not need the perfect message, the cleverest response, or a carefully crafted image. People rarely remember flawless conversations. They remember how they felt while standing beside you. When you listen with genuine curiosity, speak honestly, and allow yourself to be fully present, your influence becomes natural instead of forced. Another freeing realization is that not everyone is meant to think about you forever. The human mind is shaped by countless experiences, personal histories, and emotional needs. Someone forgetting you does not erase your worth, just as someone constantly thinking about you does not define it. Your value has never depended on the amount of space you occupy inside another person's memory. Psychology offers a comforting truth here. Secure relationships are not built by creating emotional dependence. They are built by creating emotional safety. When people feel accepted rather than manipulated, understood rather than judged, and respected rather than controlled, they naturally associate your presence with peace instead of pressure. Those are the memories that quietly endure. This also means allowing silence to exist without panic. Not every pause needs to be filled. Not every unanswered message carries hidden rejection. The nervous system becomes calmer when it learns that uncertainty is not always danger. Over time, your mind stops chasing every possibility and starts experiencing relationships as they truly are, instead of constantly imagining what they might become. As this inner calm grows, something beautiful happens. You become less concerned with leaving an unforgettable impression and more interested in creating genuine moments. Ironically, this is often when people remember you most. Authenticity has a quiet gravity. It draws people close without demanding their attention because it gives them permission to be authentic as well. Perhaps the greatest freedom is realizing that your presence is not measured by how often someone thinks about you, but by the quality of the moments you shared together. A single act of kindness, an honest conversation, or a moment of quiet understanding can echo through another person's life in ways you may never witness. Influence does not always announce itself. Sometimes it simply lives on inside someone else's courage, hope, or healing. When you stop chasing remembrance and start living with openness, compassion, and quiet confidence, you also begin remembering yourself. The energy once spent controlling outcomes returns to building a life that feels meaningful from within. And a person who is deeply at home within themselves often becomes unforgettable, not because they tried to be, but because they reminded others what genuine humanity feels like. As life moves forward, people will forget your clothes, your carefully chosen words, and many of the details you once believed mattered most. Yet the quiet feeling you left behind may continue traveling with them, appearing in unexpected moments, like sunlight returning through clouds after a long storm. That is how emotional memory works. It outlives appearances because it becomes part of another person's inner story. Perhaps the greatest paradox of human connection is this: the people who stay in our minds are often those who never fought to stay there. They offered honesty instead of performance, presence instead of pressure, and kindness without demanding a reward. Their influence was not built through manipulation, but through the simple courage of being fully themselves. So if you truly want to become someone people remember, do not spend your life trying to occupy their thoughts. Spend it creating moments that help them feel understood, respected, and safe enough to become more of who they already are. Long after conversations fade, those feelings will continue speaking on your behalf. And if someone forgets you despite your sincerity, let that be a reminder rather than a wound. Every person carries a different history, a different heart, and a different path through life. Your purpose is not to become unforgettable to everyone. It is to be genuinely meaningful to the people whose lives naturally intersect with yours. The mind is powerful, but the heart is wiser. The mind clings to certainty, while the heart quietly remembers truth. When those two work together, relationships stop feeling like puzzles to solve and begin feeling like places where both people can simply exist without fear. Maybe the real secret was never making people think about you. Maybe it was becoming someone whose presence leaves others feeling a little lighter, a little braver, and a little more human than before. Those are the impressions that time rarely erases because they become woven into the invisible fabric of another person's life. If this reflection helped you see yourself or someone else in a new way, share your thoughts in the comments. Your story may become the understanding someone else has been searching for. And if you enjoy exploring the hidden psychology behind everyday human behavior, consider liking this video, subscribing, and sharing it with someone who might need these words today. Until next time, remember that the deepest influence is rarely the loudest. It is the quiet presence that changes a heart without asking for recognition, then gently disappears, leaving behind a memory that continues to guide someone long after the moment has passed.